This here is Chevy. Rudy and Harley are in the other room. So basically, this is the roadmap to success. Oh, you're going to spaz out and get away? All right. So I always prefer to have a dog on camera, but I can do it from solo. So basically, these dogs don't listen because they really don't have any impulse control, because really their guardians haven't taught them any rules, boundaries, or limits. So when they see something, they just take it. We have, hey buddy, now we have a couple older dogs and a young puppy. And the puppy is really starting to assert himself and try and just take whatever he wants, which is natural for him to do it. But we don't want to put the adult dogs in a position where they feel like they have to take things too far to correct the puppy. So the more that we can orchestrate things by incorporating rules, boundaries, and limits, the more the dogs start to respect the humans as authority figures. Sit. So because of that, I'd like the guardians to do, as we mentioned in the other video, start petting the dogs with a purpose and stop petting them on demand. I'd also like the guardians to use passive training. So every time the dog comes to them on its own, we're going to pet it and say here, which is the new word for Chevy. Now we may want to actually have a different here word for each dog, because there's 3 dogs that basically live together. It's nice to be able to say here for one dog, come for another dog, and maybe attention for the third dog. Now the dogs, I can communicate with them a little bit more effectively. When I give a unique command word, I usually do that as a release word, release from kennel word, come word, and eating word. We just got done feeding them, and so we're going to add structure to mealtime. Because dogs spend 90% of their time in the wild looking for food, we're going to start feeding them one at a time, but only after the human eats first. We control access to the kitchen as we just got done doing, so this way the dogs, I'm getting hidden behind tails and heads, but this way the dogs understand we're going to do that, feed them every day anyway. So we add a little bit of structure to feed mealtime, then after a while that helps them develop a little bit more discipline and respect for authority as authority figures for us. All right, so petting the dogs with a purpose and passive training are a great way to use positive reinforcement to help shape the dogs into behaviors that we want. But sometimes the dogs are going to do things that we don't want them to do, like squeak this while we're doing a video. So the escalating consequences that I went over with the guardians, the first one we want to do is we want to hiss. You're like, you have a pocket full of treats, I'm not going to listen to you. The first thing we do is hiss 1 time per incident. Second thing we do is abruptly stand up. In this case, I'm going to ask you to sit down, sit, sit. So we stand up abruptly and turn to face the dog. Remember, our authority goes whichever direction our belly button is pointing. We keep pivoting and keep the dog in front of us until it's stationary. It can stand, sit, or lie down. As soon as it stands, sits, or lie down, we take 1 step backwards, left, right only. The next step, the next consequence, I should say, is marching at the dog. Now when we do it, one of the guardians had a tendency to dip her head and bend at the waist. Don't. The higher you stand, the more authority you have. March directly at that dog. If the dog goes to the side, you change course and go directly at the dog. Keep marching at the dog with intent, so some suddenness, some momentum, until the dog turns sideways. As soon as the dog turns sideways or greater, we stop in place. We put our feet back together so they're parallel, and then we pivot and keep facing the dog until it's stationary. Basically, we go to the second consequence. As soon as it's stationary, we take a step backwards. That's the second consequence. The only time I don't stop if the dog turns sideways is if the dog is in a designated no dog zone. So let's say that this is a no dog zone because somebody's sitting here has food, and I get up and march at the dog and turn sideways right here. Well, it's still not supposed to be within 7 feet of anybody eating food, so I would just bump into the dog and I would keep marching towards him until he gets 7 feet. That's when I would stop. This is how we established a boundary to the kitchen. All right, so the third consequence is march at the dog directly and suddenly until it turns sideways or greater. Then we stop, go to the second consequence. Wait for it, pivot until wait for it to be stationary, then take those 2 step backwards. The last consequence is what I call a leash timeout. I put the dog on a leash and I step on the leash. In these dogs' case, about 3 feet away from where it's attached to the collar. Now, because Chevy likes to chew on the leash, we were using a chain leash. Don't use this for other capacities, but for teaching your dog leash timeout, if it chews on the leash, it's the best way to go. The dog might throw a temper tantrum. If it does, just stand out with 2 feet. Don't correct the dog. Don't give it any direction. It's a good way to burn energy. When it gets done and sits down, take the foot that's on the leash, slide it towards the dog to take the tension off of the leash. Once the dog lays down, and again, I don't tell it to do it. When it does it on its own, then I very subtly take my foot off the leash. As long as the dog is calm. If it's laying down like this, I still wait. So basically what we're telling the dog is when you are defiant, because we've hissed, then we stood up, then we marched, and the dog kept on doing it, now you lose all freedom. Now, when we put a dog on a leash, as soon as the dog lays down and is calm, we take our foot off the leash. The dog is now free, but the leash is still attached. Should not walk around dragging the leash around unsupervised because it can be dangerous. But if a couple minutes later the dog does the wrong thing again, as it walks by, we step on the leash and we reapply the consequence. Or if a couple minutes go by and the dog is good, then we detach the leash and it's not a quid pro quo. So that's the 4 escalating consequences. You can combine them. I might hiss, stand up, and rush at the dog all at once is a strong move. The main thing is make sure you always start with the hiss. Otherwise, you always have to start with the stand up or a march or whatever you do first. Remember, the hiss should be done before the dog does the wrong thing, not waiting for it to do it and then correct it. Let me see. I went through a couple of exercises. Before we get to those, a couple of house cleaning things. I want the guardians to get in a habit of no longer walking around their dog, walking through their dog. If the dog is in the way, keep walking. The dog needs to learn to defer and get out of their way. Anytime we're going through a door, if we're going through the door with the dog should go after us. If we're going down the stairs, the dog should wait at the top of the stairs and then go down after we call them. If it goes into a hallway, if the dog goes first, for dogs, whoever's in front is literally considered the leader. So by asking the dog to wait and have the human go first, we can help the dog start to recalibrate the leader-follower dynamic. Now, if you're just letting the dog outside, we're just going to open the door and let it go out. That's different. But for the door, one of the rules we incorporated was having to sit and wait at the door, sit before we open the door. And we're only going to ask once. So I say sit, and let's say Harley sits and Rudy doesn't. Then I open the door, let Harley out, and Rudy doesn't go out. I walk away from the door, wait 1 minute, then go back and give him the command again. If he doesn't sit down this time, within about 3 to 5 seconds, I walk away this time for 2 minutes. Next time for 4 minutes. Next time for 8 minutes. Yes, we have the zoomies. With the zoomies are a good indicator that the dog has too much energy. And this is something else we went over during the session, is Chevy here is a high energy dog, and the 2 dogs that he lives with are not high energy because they're middle age at this point. So we want to start a journal of exercise for Chevy. Now, he likes to fetch. We're going to add a little bit more structure to fetching. We're going to say we're going to say fetch as we throw it. When he touches it with his lips to pick up the item, we're going to say fetch again. Then we're going to hold the treat like this when he comes to us. We're going to hold the treat, wait for him to drop it, and then as soon as he drops it, pop that treat in his mouth and say the word fetch. Then we pick up the ball, and repeat the process. Fetching with him is going to be a great way to burn energy because he gets to really get his pursuit mode going. Keep track of how many fetches and how many times a day you fetch him. I'm guessing for him, because he's such a high energy dog, he's going to need fetches, a run or a walk, and the leadership exercise and some other exercises to give him some mental stimulation as well. Keep the journal and keep on varying up his exercise regimen until you come up with one that works really well for him, and then start repeating that every day until he gets to about 3 or 4 when they start to mellow out. If the guardian has the inclination, rollerblades is one of my favorite ways to burn energy because it does it so fast and it's such an efficient workout. Just make sure when you do that you're using a harness, not using a regular collar, and keep the leash short anytime you come around people or a turn or congested traffic or something. Just kind of wrap the leash around your wrist, keep it and make it shorter until the dog's right next to you. As soon as you're back in clear space, then you can let him run in front of you. I also try to train a whoa means slow down and stop pulling. Charge or pull means to pull. So if they see a squirrel or rabbit, they start pulling. Use passive training and say pull. And if you do that consistently enough, then you can say pull and they'll start pulling you on command. Let's see what else. The exercises we went over. We did a focus exercise. We also did a leadership exercise. And we did a hand targeting exercise. I don't think I have a video for the hand targeting exercise on my website, but if you go to doggoneproblems.com and click on the dog training tips section, there on the right side of the page, that doesn't feel gentle. On the right side of the page, you'll see a search box. You can type in leadership exercise or focus exercise, and videos from other clients where I've done those exercises will come up. You'll be able to watch them, just like the Petting with a Purpose will for you guys, for other people. Let's see what else. We're going to practice the recall exercise. So remember, you keep your hand with this part of your arm parallel with the floor. If the dog doesn't sit, we go over their head in an arc to put them in a sit. As soon as they sit, we lower it, let him lick it off our fingers while we simultaneously say the command word and tickle them under their chin. Remember, anytime we give a treat to the dog, they should hear the command word the second the treat touches their lips, not before and not too far after. Let's see, what else do we want to go over? We went through structured feeding. I think we've covered most of the broad strokes that we went over in the session. Last thing is I want the Guardians to start claiming a 1 foot bubble of personal space. We're going to do that with the escalating consequences. Eventually, as we've already started to see, Chevy's already starting to demand. He's starting to sit down in front of people and to ask for attention rather than jumping up on them. For the jumping up, we're going to use that hand technique that I showed you. I'm not going to talk about that on camera because that's one of the tricks that you have to hire me to learn. But we're going to make sure you do the technique that I showed you with his front paws and make him pull back about 3 times before we actually let go. All right, well, as Chevy is saying, I've got a surge of energy. I'm ready to go back to some rollerblading or something else. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.